which reminds me, Oliver, you mentioned you've used XR and stuff at BIG.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so how have you been doing? What exactly is the application of those technologies there?
Well, I mean, I've definitely been experimenting with augmented reality and also, virtual reality. Virtual reality is kind of now bread and butter tool at this point. Like we have, VR stations and things like that, and I think VR has already become a kind of established tool in the architect's kind of tool belt. It's a great VR. I think is great for uh, showing and expressing space. We've suddenly jumped out of the evolution of it's a higher bandwidth of communication. I think both of AR and VR is a higher bandwidth of communication for us. So you think of what we do, we spend all this time creating these 3D objects in this virtual world, and then we output 2D drawings to someone. And then they give that to someone else, and they give that to someone else, and someone else, and then the thing gets built. So it's an odd process when we think about it, but that's just how it's one of those statements. That's how it is. That's how we do things, and that's contractually. I need a drawing rather than a 3D model. But so what virtual reality does, which I think is quite interesting, is instead of when we communicate our ideas, we're communicating 3D space, and we usually do that through 2D, and then there's pseudo 2D where we're like, yes, it's an image on a computer, it's a render, and you can get a sense of real world. It can look like a real picture. Then we have animation and fly-throughs where we're kind of like in this pseudo 3D space, but virtual reality really enabled us to communicate what it might be like to be in that space. So there's no special tools that's going on in there. We're just really using VR with like tools like Enscape, and you can put the headset on and really experience it. Augmented reality is one we're more in the kind of experimental phase of like, where is this going to fit within an architecture practice? And augmented reality for me is more about connecting with the act of making, because there's no better way than to literally show someone how to make something in 3D. So you can put a headset on, like in an augmented reality headset like the HoloLens, and you can show someone exactly how to build it. Now, that's where I think this technology is really exciting. Of course, there's other ways. We're also like experimenting with how do you can preview and interact with scripts with the HoloLens on and really get a sense of scale. So there is it can be implemented at a design level, and of course we can use augmented reality as well to tell stories and create overlay things on models and diagrams. So that there is there, but for me, I think augmented reality is super exciting by connecting with the act of making. And what's a little bit tricky at the moment is architects are not connected to the act of making right now, but but maybe this technology will allow us to put our foot back in there, because what we're having conversations with is like, okay, if we design something that's a little bit complicated, or it's hard to make sure that it's built the way we want it in 2D drawings, maybe we can help by aiding the contractor through the use of HoloLens and iPads and things like that to make sure that we've communicated our design and it's built correctly. So I think it's definitely two really exciting aspects. Augmented reality for me, the act of making is really exciting, and I think it's a pathway for us architects to get back on site and connect with actual making. And virtual reality is really, it's a great storytelling tool. It's a great spatial experience thing, but I feel like it's a bit more established than AR, right?
With the AR, by the way, there's I mean, so, progressively there's Hologram, and there's this project, especially it helps a lot with computational projects, where you augment what you're going to be building, and then you start placing things right on the model that you see. So that it also helps a lot with the construction process. Like it takes a lot of drawings out of the picture, because now you don't have to do drawings, because you can just augment it and start placing things where they would be placed. And that's really an awesome thing. I remember when I was a first or second year student, I would be dreaming about getting rid of drawings and just projecting like a hologram of the whole building in the place. I would think about this high intensity lamp that would project the whole thing, and a hologram of the building in the place, and we could just build it. But actually there's an easier way, which is AR. You don't have to project the whole building. Everybody could have synchronized HoloLenses where they could just build something together. Exactly. And then go to the future from there. That's awesome. So that's really an awesome thing, that it helps with construction process as much as VR is more for presentation nowadays. Like you present your project in there and you communicate with your team there, and then AR could help with the construction process itself and not just showing things and doing things.
Yeah.
And at the same time, of course, it will affect a lot of the final project where you can augment a lot of stuff. So you don't have to stick advertisements on the boards where you could have them, augmented, things like that, which affects the space itself. It's like suddenly, like Ollie was saying, yeah, exactly, introducing flying cars and the whole urban canvas changes. I think when AR gets into buildings, the buildings will change too, because that's how it is. Like you'll have lots of things that would be augmented instead of physically existing.
Yeah, you could. That's another aspect. Is you could. It's a whole new layer of a world. I could be walking around with my glasses on. As you can see, they're very discreet, and you've got this whole world that you can overlay on top of the real world. And so maybe there's a whole world of like augmented architects where you're creating these insane, maybe billboards or like, something, this digital overlay, very kind of, sci-fi futuristic. You kind of put your glasses on and you can see this whole world on top of. It does raise a question of like, there could be this whole advertising world that could be a dystopian.
Dystopian way of using it. And that's the thing. Like if architects don't get into designing that world, the marketing people will. And that's the thing about it, like because there's always this clash between the landscapes, right? Like of people placing billboards in the street, and then architects trying to say how this is not that good looking, like it's really a lot of visual pollution, try to put it this way or that way, and then it changes that way. Like architects should have a say in these things, I think. And that's actually the one team that does this really well and has been speculating on this topic for a while is I Heart Blob. They have this huge speculation series of how AR would be used in architecture, and they don't just overlay things, but also delete things from reality and things like that. So there's so many ways AR would affect buildings, and sometimes you would just need a room. I think that's the biggest thing that AR would change, is that you don't need you're not gonna need big buildings so much if you have AR, because you can change the spaces on the fly. You could you could have one room instead of 5 that is different from one another and things like that. So it's something really exciting coming up, and BIM I think will catch up to it too. Like I think instead of overlaying, I think in the future of BIM, we would not just be modeling the physical building, but have these surfaces of AR where they would be popping up, and
In
how
fact,
would
there's
they
this
change and things like
application.
that.
there's this application that connects to your BIM model, and basically at the construction site you can overlay your entire BIM model. I'm forgetting the name of the application, but yeah, you
But I
can
mean,
just observe clashes in real time in on the
absolutely.
site and
But that's
stuff.
in the planning phase. What I meant is that in the final project, you would have to have that planned in BIM beforehand.
Right.
Like wherever something would pop up or be something overlaid, you would have the same model saying like, hey, this is the augmented version, this is the thing. Like you would actually build that augmented model too in BIM. And that becomes really exciting. I remember doing this workshop with Vamsi about half a year back, and it was all about virtual projects. And we would, whenever you're doing the 3D project, there would be, for example, text popping up or spatial interfaces popping up. You would have to design those too, and then you would have to design where they would be. So you would actually design it in all spatial 3D and as well, and your model would have all of that in layers. And where you're actually planning what you would be building in augmented reality later. Like what's the difference? The only difference is that you would be planning something in BIM that you would actually physically build with rocks or I don't know, concrete or steel, and then on top of that you could also plan in your model what you're going to have augmented on top of it, like with surfaces or text, and everything. So there's lots of exciting things coming up for architects. I think that's
BIM is integrating with a lot of these technologies already. I think even 3D scanning, there's 3D printing. Ollie, do you see any of these things happening at BIG, or do you see any of these things happening in the architecture industry in general, like BIM interacting with other technologies in real world projects?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we see a lot of. There's definitely a lot of crossover of stuff. I mean, just to go back, yeah, like you mentioned Fologram. Fologram is kind of our main experiment in the AR world. And I think it's been really great to interact with Rhino and Grasshopper scripts through augmented reality. That's been super exciting. And I think the project that they did at the Italian Architecture Biennale, I may be pronouncing that wrong, with Steampunk, I think it is the
Steampunk
Architect
Pavilion, yeah.
Steampunk Pavilion. They that was really interesting, like a true testament to what you were saying, Arek. Was like they created this insanely complicated building or pavilion without a single drawing, just using augmented reality and the HoloLens to fabricate, assemble, and all this kind of stuff, which is it's super exciting to see. And maybe that's I hope that's the future, is paperless construction. And I think you'll see a lot more construction workers with the HoloLens and things like that in the future. But yeah, in terms of, I mean, there's definitely a lot of crossover. I think what's really exciting about working in a place like BIG is there is that intersection between design and technology. Like the teams incorporate a lot of really interesting technology into the projects. Whether it's 3D printing or the automation of cars or vertical farming, urban farming, all these kind of things. And sometimes that does, BIM will come into that conversation in one way or another, whether we're talking about digital twins or some other kind of aspect, or computation will mix in with augmented reality. So there's always a crossover between them, but it depends completely on the projects. Like some are more experimental, some are more kind of realistic bread and butter kind of projects.